Thin winter sunlight stretched long shadows across the quiet stretch of Main Street as a gray Volvo pulled silently to a stop outside the Blue Harbor Diner. The man who stepped out of the car wore a dark pea coat and scuffed leather shoes. Nothing about his appearance suggested wealth, let alone the fact that he had purchased the diner just 2 days earlier. Ethan Cole wasn't the type of businessman who sought attention. He was calm, introspective, driven by a quiet passion to restore what others had written off as forgotten relics. He paused for a moment on the sidewalk, eyes fixed on the flickering neon sign above the door. A lobster nestled inside a nautical compass. The once bull and white paint had chipped away, and the edges of the building bore the weight of time. But there was something nostalgic in that weathered exterior, something that had convinced Ethan this place deserved a second chance. This wasn't just an investment, it was part of his personal mission, to breathe new life into spaces that once held meaning for a community slowly eroded by modern indifference. His phone buzzed in his coat pocket for the third time in an hour, probably his assistant in Manhattan. But Ethan didn't bother checking it. New York will still be there, he thought as he pushed open the glass door. The little bell above jingled gently, marking the quiet start of a new chapter. Inside, the warmth contrasted sharply with the cold outside, filled with the comforting aroma of coffee, melting butter, and a faint hint of seafood. The diner was moderately busy, mostly locals who greeted one another like old friends. Ethan quickly noted the flaws, chipped ceramic mugs and an ancient cash register. Yet beneath the surface something still lived here. A quiet heartbeat, stubborn and resilient beneath layers of dust and time. The platinum blonde hostess, Kayla, according to her name tag, looked up from her phone, barely feigning politeness. "Just you?" she asked, not really looking at him. Ethan nodded. "If possible, I'd like a seat by the window." Kayla shrugged and led him to a worn booth in the back, dropping a laminated menu onto the table with a thud, as though it were the last thing she wanted to do. Ethan settled in, scanning the room over the edge of the menu. A middle-aged waitress laughed with a table of regulars. A younger waitress darted between tables, clearly overwhelmed. Behind the counter, a cook in a stained apron flipped burgers with the confidence of experience, occasionally shouting out completed orders. Ethan observed it all silently. This place was beginning to reveal itself to him, but he withheld judgment. The bell chimed again and an elderly man in a frayed sweater stepped inside. He quietly took a seat at the counter alone. Ethan noticed Kayla roll her eyes and smirk. Her voice just loud enough for a passing server, a tall, scruffy-hailed young man, to hear. "Old man Jenkins is back. Bet $10 he just orders a coffee and camps out all afternoon." The server chuckled. "At least he tips better than the church crowd on Sundays." A chill crept down Ethan's spine. Those careless, mocking words revealed something deeper. He made a note on his phone. Not just about the diner's physical shortcomings, but about the attitudes he would need to change. A little while later, another waitress approached his table. Her hair was tied back neatly, and though she looked tired, her demeanor was sincere. "Good evening. What can I get you?" Her name tag read, Emily. "Black coffee, please," Ethan replied. She nodded. "Tonight's special is lobster thermidor with seasonal vegetables and garlic mashed potatoes. Comes with soup or salad." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Lobster? That's pretty upscale for a diner." Emily gave a slight smile, hesitating. "The previous owner wanted to upgrade the menu. It doesn't always sell, but the lobster's fresh. Came in from Portland this morning." "Then I'll try that," Ethan said. "With clam chowder, please." She jotted down the order and walked away, leaving Ethan to continue his quiet undercover assessment. But this was no longer just about operations. Something more personal was stirring, a sense of duty. He hadn't bought this place just to make money. He'd bought it to make it right. Outside the window, the harbor reflected the colors of a fading sunset, The very harbor that gave this diner its name for more than 4 decades. But Ethan knew that if he wanted to bring it back to life, he'd have to start from the roots, beginning with how people treated one another. The bell chimed once more. This time a middle-aged woman entered, wearing a thin but well-kept coat. She clutched her worn purse like it held everything she owned. Her steps were tentative, her eyes scanning, as if afraid she might be turned away just for being who she was. Ethan noticed the change in Kayla's expression. Her greeting lacked warmth, as though a mask had slipped. Kayla led the woman to the worst seat in the diner, next to the noisy kitchen doors, even though there were better tables available. Ethan tightened his grip on the coffee mug. Behind the everyday chatter, he was beginning to see something much darker. A culture of quiet cruelty. He returned with his coffee and chowder. "How long have you worked here, Emily?" Ethan asked gently. She smiled, tired but kind. "Almost 3 years. I started part-time during college, but now I'm full-time, trying to save up and figure out what's next." "And how do you feel about this place?" Ethan asked, watching her carefully. She hesitated. "Most of the regulars are nice, and the job pays the bills." There was something guarded in her voice, something she was holding back. "But?" Ethan prodded. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Management's been checked out lately. This place, it could be great again, if someone actually cared." Before he could respond, a voice called from the kitchen. "Emily, your order's up." She excused herself and hurried off. Ethan took a spoonful of chowder. Surprisingly delicious. Rich, balanced, and perfectly seasoned. He made a note. The kitchen has talent, if given the chance. As he continued eating, the diner began to unfold like a silent play. Jason, the server with the man bun, leaned against the wall, scrolling his phone. Miguel, the cook, had to shout repeatedly for servers to pick up food. A man in a button-down shirt paused around with disinterest and disappeared again. Emily returned with Ethan's entree, lobster thermidor plated beautifully, golden cheese crust over sweet lobster meat, surrounded by crisp vegetables. "Miguel went to culinary school," Emily said quietly. "He makes this dish from scratch." Ethan took a bite. It was flawless. Underneath this diner's worn exterior lay potential. Real, tangible excellence waiting to be unlocked. But then he caught sight of Kayla and Jason whispering again, looking toward the woman seated near the kitchen. "Bet she orders water and the cheapest thing," Kayla scoffed. "People like that don't deserve lobster. Probably gonna ask if we take food stamps." Jason snickered. Ethan froze, fork suspended mid-air. The woman had no idea she was being mocked. She was carefully studying the menu, her hands trembling slightly as she signaled for Emily. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. He had come here expecting outdated systems or inefficient service, things easily fixed. But what he'd uncovered was something much worse, a toxic culture, rooted in contempt and disregard. This diner, once a beloved cornerstone of the community, had rotted from within. He set down his fork. A plan was already forming, but he wouldn't act yet. He needed to understand the full extent of the problem before making his move. Ethan Cole never rushed. His success was built on timing, on precision. But one thing was now absolutely certain. Everything was about to change. A flicker of hesitation passed through Emily's eyes, something like shame or regret, before she asked, "So, what have you noticed so far?" Ethan took a moment to consider before answering. "It's interesting. Some places survive on inertia, and some survive because of a few people who still care." Emily glanced around, then lowered her voice. "It wasn't always like this. Blue Harbor used to be something special. The old owner, Mr. Sullivan, knew everyone's name. People loved him. Her voice softened. But ever since he retired, everything changed. And now, Ethan prompted gently, the atmosphere's different. I've thought about leaving a few times, but good jobs in this town are rare, and I have family to take care of. Before she could finish, Paul's voice rang out from behind the counter. Emily, less chatting, more cleaning. Table 8's still dirty. She quickly excused herself and rushed off, leaving Ethan deep in thought. Soon after, Zoe appeared behind the counter, opened the cash register with practiced ease, pulled out a few bills and slipped them into her apron pocket. Her movements were swift, as if she'd done it hundreds of times. Ethan could barely believe his eyes. This wasn't just stealing, it was habitual theft, carried out with shocking ease. An hour later, Ethan left the diner with a heavy heart. This wasn't just a struggling business. It was rotting from the inside. Tax fraud, cash skimming, class-based discrimination, mistreatment of good employees. It all pointed to a deeply corrupted culture. But even in that darkness, he'd found a glimmer of light. Emily. And maybe, just maybe, there were others like her. Another day passed. The salty sea breeze of night carried a bite as Ethan returned to the Blue Harbor Diner for the 5th time in 8 days. It was Friday, typically a busy night. A perfect chance to confirm his observations and uncover more. He chose a booth with a clear view of the dining room. The diner buzzed with weekend energy, families celebrating, young couples on dates, groups of friends laughing over late dinners. If someone didn't know better, they'd think this was a cozy, cheerful little place. Emily approached, recognition lighting up her face. You again? Our coffee must be addictive, she teased lightly. Must be, Ethan smiled. Though I think I'm mostly here for anthropological research. Any interesting findings? She tilted her head. Every day brings something new to learn, he replied. But before they could continue, the front bell chimed again. A young woman walked in, holding the hand of a small boy, maybe 7 years old. Both were neatly dressed, though modestly. The woman wore a faded dress, while the boy had on a button-up shirt a size too big, likely meant to last as he grew. Is this our special dinner, Mom? The boy asked, eyes sparkling with excitement. Yes, Tyler, just like I promised, his mother said, smiling warmly, though the fatigue of long nights weighed behind her eyes. Zoe approached their table with her usual professional smile, though her gaze remained cold. I'll have a chocolate milk for my son, the mother said, and just water for me. We're going to order the lobster, Tyler added proudly. Mom said it's my birthday treat. Zoe's expression shifted. Subtle, but colder. Lobster thermidor is $32, she said pointedly, as if warning them not to get their hopes up. The mother's cheeks flushed. I know, it's a special occasion. Zoe walked away but made a deliberate detour toward Jason, whispering something under her breath. Ethan, seated nearby, caught every word. Table 12, Zoe murmured. Single mom splurging on lobster with child support money. Maybe she's got a new boyfriend footing the bill. Jason snickered. Did you see her shoes? Probably can't afford them. Ethan clenched his jaw. His knuckles turned white around his water glass. The cruelty in their voices, casual, sneering, shocked him all over again. What hurt more was their complete indifference to the pain they might cause. Emily returned with his water, instantly noticing something off in his expression. Are you okay, sir? She asked gently. Just thinking, Ethan replied, his voice low. He didn't trust himself to say more without his anger spilling out. Evening settled in, the chatter in the diner loud and constant. Ethan kept his order simple, just soup and bread, maintaining his position as a harmless diner guest. But his focus never left table 12. Tyler lit up as the lobster thermidor was brought out, his mouth forming a perfect O. It looks just like in the pictures, he exclaimed. His mother smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Use your inside voice, sweetie." Tyler nodded solemnly, picking up his fork with great care. He took his first bite and froze. His eyes clouded with confusion. "Mom," he whispered, just loud enough for Ethan to hear. "It's cold in the middle." Ethan frowned. Miguel, the head chef, was known for precision. Such a basic mistake didn't add up. The mother checked the dish and gently called Zoe over. "I'm sorry, but this seems undercooked. It's cold in the center." Zoe's smile faded, her tone turning snappy. "That's how thermidor's supposed to be." "I don't think so," the mother replied politely. "I've had it before. It should be hot all the way through." Zoe sighed dramatically. "Fine, I'll take it back. But just so you know, reheated lobster gets tough." As she passed the kitchen, Ethan clearly heard her tell Miguel, "Just nuke it for 30 seconds and send it out. They won't know the difference." At that moment, something inside Ethan broke. All the notes, the evidence, the observations he had gathered over nearly 2 weeks, they weren't just words on a page. They were stains on his own name. This wasn't just a business anymore. It was a moral failure. A place that bore his name, yet violated everything he stood for. He stood abruptly, leaving enough cash to cover the bill and a generous tip for Emily. For a split second, he wanted to shout the truth, that he was the owner, that everything was about to change. He imagined the stunned faces of Zoe, Jason, and Paul, and felt a flash of grim satisfaction. But no. Emotion wouldn't solve this. Ethan had never succeeded by acting out of impulse. He would act with clarity and strategy. This would be a surgical operation. He walked past Tyler's table. The boy sat quietly, disappointed. His birthday dinner ruined. His mother checked her wallet, likely wondering if she could afford another dish. Outside, the cold night air bit deep. Ethan took several deep breaths to calm the fury burning inside. Tomorrow he would no longer be a passive observer. The charade was over. The time had come to remove the rot from Blue Harbor Diner, thoroughly, decisively, and without mercy. On Saturday morning, Ethan arrived at a modest office space just 3 blocks from the diner. Sparsely furnished with a table, a few chairs, and a whiteboard. It would do. On the board he mapped everything he knew. A web of misconduct that traced rot all the way to the core. At 9 o'clock, "I am sharp," a knock echoed. Ethan adjusted his tie, steadying his breath. It was time. Samantha Reeves, his most trusted operations consultant, stepped in, followed by David Mercer, the legal expert who had managed many of Ethan's most delicate acquisitions. "Thanks for coming on such short notice," Ethan said, shaking their hands. "Your message sounded urgent," Samantha replied, setting up her laptop. "I have to admit, I didn't expect it to be a small-town diner. It was supposed to be a simple investment," Ethan explained. "But it's turned into something much more complicated." For the next hour, he laid everything out. The customer mistreatment, the financial fraud, the toxic work environment. Samantha took notes. David's face grew increasingly grim. "What you're describing," David summarized, "could constitute tax evasion, labor violations, and a hostile workplace." "Exactly," Ethan confirmed. "I want a full audit before we act." Samantha, "Assess operations, staffing, training, service standards." David, "Review all legal and financial exposure. I've arranged access credentials and signed authorization letters." He slid 2 folders across the table. "The current manager has no idea who I am. Let's keep it that way." "And the staff?" David asked. "If this is as bad as it sounds, there will be terminations." Ethan nodded. "Once we're sure, but yes, most of the staff will likely go." "Any exceptions?" Samantha asked. Emily. She's the only reason I still have hope." The meeting ended with a detailed plan. Samantha would conduct a silent operational audit, David would begin forensic accounting. As they left, Ethan remained at the whiteboard, his mind sharp and focused. This was the turning point. A text from Samantha arrived. System access verified. Initial findings are troubling. Full report tonight. Ethan picked up his phone again, scrolling to a number he'd saved the day before. Emily answered on the third ring. "Hi, Emily, this is Ethan," the guy from the window booth. "How did you get my number?" she asked, surprised. "You mentioned you were studying restaurant management," Ethan said gently. "I have a proposal. Would you be open to grabbing a coffee tomorrow?" "Is this about work?" she asked, the hesitation in her voice unmistakable. "Entirely professional," Ethan assured her. "I'm interested in your perspective. You've been incredibly impressive." "Well, sure, tomorrow afternoon works." They agreed to meet at a cafe in the next town over, far enough to avoid familiar eyes and ears. On Sunday, Ethan received the first round of reports. David's financial audit confirmed severe misconduct, irregular cash transactions, hidden income, and glaring holes in tax documentation. Employee records pointed to possible wage theft. Samantha's findings were no less troubling. Legally installed cameras in public areas of the diner had captured a range of violations: food tampering, discriminatory service, and intentional neglect of customer orders. That evening, during a video call, David stated plainly, "The evidence is overwhelming. If you don't act, you could be held legally liable." Samantha added, "Every day this continues, your personal responsibility increases." Ethan had just wrapped up the call with David and Samantha when it was time for his meeting with Emily. The cafe was quiet, bathed in the soft Sunday afternoon light pouring through tall windows. Emily had arrived early, seated in a quiet corner. Out of uniform, she looked younger, in a simple cream sweater and jeans. Unassuming, but unmistakably the bright spot Ethan had identified in an otherwise decaying system. "Thanks for coming," Ethan said as he joined her at the table. "I'm still not sure I understand why you wanted to meet. You're just a regular customer, right?" Ethan gave a faint smile. "Not exactly." He paused briefly, then continued. "I work in business acquisitions and restructuring." Emily's eyes widened slightly. "So, you're not just passing through?" "No," Ethan confirmed. "I've been evaluating several businesses in town. Blue Harbor Diner among them. It wasn't a lie, but it deliberately left out the most important truth, that he owned it. When we spoke before, I saw something rare in you. Integrity and responsibility, in an environment that doesn't exactly make that easy." He met her eyes. "If you were running that diner, what would you change first?" Emily seemed caught off guard by the direct question. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully before answering. "Definitely the staff culture. The way some people treat customers. It's wrong, both morally and professionally." "And if you were tasked with rebuilding it?" Ethan prompted. "Clear expectations, real consequences when they're not met, and retraining not just skills, but values. Teaching staff that every person who walks in matters." She paused, then added, "The menu also needs tightening. Miguel's talent should be showcased at dinner with premium dishes, but lunch needs to be simpler. Let him focus on doing fewer things exceptionally well." Ethan sat quietly, taking it all in. Not only was she ethical, she was strategic. She understood both operations and the emotional heartbeat of a community business. "What if I told you," Ethan said slowly, "that such an opportunity may be opening up soon?" Emily studied him, her expression sharpening. "Who are you, really?" "I'm someone who believes that business can be a force for good," Ethan replied earnestly, "and that people like you are at the core of real change." The meeting ended with Emily taking his business card, this time one that bore the name of Ethan's investment firm. She was still unsure, but she didn't refuse. She gave a small nod and a cautious smile. "I'll think about it." Ethan remained seated after she left, watching the sun sink lower through the windows. For the first time since he'd begun this operation, he felt real hope. The system might be rotten, but not everyone within it was lost. And those who remained true, they were the foundation for something better. Tomorrow would bring the storm, but today he was betting on renewal. Monday morning arrived with the heavy quiet that precedes a reckoning. Ethan stood outside the Blue Harbor Diner at 10:30 a.m., the lull between breakfast and lunch. For the first time since acquiring the business, he dressed like its owner. Charcoal suit, ocean blue tie, a nod to the building's faded facade. Behind him stood Samantha and David, both exuding quiet authority. 2 security personnel waited discreetly in a car nearby, a precaution David had insisted upon, in case of hostility. "Ready?" Samantha asked, her tablet containing the compiled evidence. Ethan nodded, adjusting his collar. "Let's go." The doorbell chimed, a familiar sound, but today it rang not with welcome, but with truth. Only a few customers remained, sipping coffee and preparing to leave. Kayla stood at the hostess station, eyes fixed on her phone. She glanced up, offering her usual forced smile, until her gaze landed on Ethan's suit. She froze. "Table for 3? She asked, her voice uncertain. "No," Ethan replied, his tone calm but firm. "I'm here for a staff meeting. Please ask Paul and all on-duty staff to come out immediately." Kayla's brow furrowed, her fake politeness vanishing. "You can't just—" "I most certainly can," Ethan interrupted, pulling a business card and a folder from his jacket. "My name is Ethan Cole. I purchased this diner 2 weeks ago. I am the new owner of Blue Harbor Diner." The color drained from Kayla's face. Her phone slipped from her hands and clattered on the counter. "You owner?" she stammered. "Correct. Now, please do as I asked." Kayla stumbled toward the kitchen, nearly colliding with Jason, who emerged carrying a plate. "What's going on?" he asked, eyes narrowing. "Staff meeting," Ethan said flatly. "Put that order down and join us." Within minutes, the entire staff had gathered in the dining area. The remaining customers, sensing tension, quietly paid and left. Paul was the last to appear, his confusion turning to unease as Kayla whispered in his ear. "Mr. Cole," Paul said, forcing a smile as he extended his hand. "What a surprise. We didn't expect—" "Clearly," Ethan said, not shaking the offered hand. "Please take a seat." The staff exchanged worried glances before settling around 2 tables pushed together. Emily arrived last, summoned from the break room. Her eyes widened as she saw Ethan. And then she understood. "For those who haven't heard," Ethan began, his voice steady, "I'm Ethan Cole, the new owner of Blue Harbor Diner. Over the past 2 weeks, I've been evaluating the business, both as a customer and through formal audit procedures." He gestured to his colleagues. "This is Samantha Reeves, my operations consultant, and David Mercer, legal counsel for Cole Investments." Paul had gone pale. "Mr. Cole, I'm sure we can discuss any concerns. You had every opportunity to manage this business properly." Ethan cut in, his voice sharp. "That opportunity has now expired." He nodded to Samantha, who distributed folders to each employee. "What I've found during this review is disturbing and in several cases illegal," Ethan continued, his voice steady and resonant. "Financial irregularities, including cash skimming and manipulated time records, tax evasion, a hostile work environment, discriminatory treatment of customers based on perceived income." The accusations hung heavy in the room. Zoe stared down at her hands. Jason bounced his leg nervously. Paul sat motionless, his face ash-gray. "The folders in front of you contain specific evidence related to your actions," Ethan explained. "This is outrageous," Paul protested, desperation in his voice. "You can't just—" "I have video, financial records, and eyewitness accounts," Ethan replied coldly. "Your mismanagement and culture of disrespect you allowed ends today." He turned to the staff. Effective immediately, the following employees are terminated: Paul Davidson, Jason Miller, Zoe Peterson, and Kayla Winters. The named individuals erupted in varying degrees of outrage. Jason stood abruptly, chair screeching against the linoleum. "You can't fire us without—" "Mr. Mercer will explain the legal process," Ethan said, motioning for David to step in. David spoke with calm authority. "Each termination packet includes documented violations and final pay calculations, adjusted for any confirmed theft. You are legally entitled to dispute these findings, but I recommend reviewing the evidence first." Paul straightened up one last time, clinging to a final shred of dignity. "This is a small town, Cole. People know me. You think you can just stroll in from New York and—" "I think," Ethan said, eyes sharp as a blade, "I can stop my business from becoming a legal liability because of illegal practices." He stepped closer, crushing whatever illusions remained. "I think I can ensure that every customer, rich or poor, is treated with respect. And I remember exactly how you once described me as just some investor who'd never show up, while encouraging your staff to cheat." Paul fell silent. All the bravado drained from him like air from a punctured balloon. Ethan looked around, his gaze settling on Emily, Miguel, and the two remaining servers, those whose names hadn't come up in the termination notices. "The diner will close today for reorganization. Those not terminated will be placed on paid leave and contacted about the opportunity to continue under new management." He paused, then said clearly, "Miss Parker, please stay behind after the others leave. I'd like to discuss the manager position with you." Emily's eyes widened. Surprise and emotion flickered across her face, but she nodded, softly, yet with resolve. "Those terminated have 15 minutes to collect their belongings. Mr. Mercer will supervise. The locks will be changed this afternoon." Silence spread like a thick fog. Zoe stared into the void. Jason muttered curses under his breath. Paul trembled as he gathered his papers. Outside, the two security guards were now clearly visible through the window. A silent reminder. Only Emily, Miguel, and the two young servers remained. Ethan approached them, his voice softer. "I apologize for the disruption, but not for the actions taken. Things had to change." Miguel nodded slowly. "You're the one who ordered the lobster that first night, aren't you?" "Yes," Ethan confirmed. "Your dish was excellent, Miguel. The problem was never the kitchen." For the first time that morning, Ethan smiled. Not out of pretense, but because of hope. Blue Harbor Diner used to be a source of pride for this town. With the right people and the right culture, it can be again. He turned to Emily, the woman who had held on to her dignity amidst moral decay. "Shall we continue that conversation about the manager position?" The storm had passed, and the first rays of a new dawn began to rise. 6 months later, the Blue Harbor Diner had been reborn from the ashes. The blue and white walls gleamed with fresh paint. The sign glowed steadily each night. No more flickering, no more buzzing. It shone like renewed belief. Inside, new red leather booths and crisp black and white tile flooring had replaced the worn-out linoleum. A refurbished vintage jukebox hummed softly in the corner, not as a relic, but as a living piece of memory. Still, what brought customers back wasn't just the look, it was the feel, a feel of sincerity. Weekend mornings buzzed with laughter and clinking dishes. Emily moved smoothly between tables, calm and confident. Her manager name tag caught the morning light. "How's the omelet today, Mr. Jenkins?" she asked the elderly man, once treated as a nuisance. "Perfect as always, Emily," he beamed. "Tell Miguel he's outdone himself." Behind the counter, Miguel led the kitchen staff like a conductor. The revised menu kept the signature lobster thermidor as a weekend special, while offering accessible yet refined dishes focused on local ingredients and genuine care. At a familiar corner booth, Ethan sat, no longer a hidden observer, but a regular presence every Friday. Emily approached, placing a folder on the table. The quarterly report is in, revenue's up 17% from last year, and customer satisfaction 92% rated us extremely satisfied, she said with a radiant smile. Weekend reservations are booked 3 weeks out. Ethan nodded approvingly. Your leadership has been key, only possible with the right team, Emily replied humbly. Once the toxic elements were removed, the rest thrived. And that training program, it changed everything. Samantha had suggested it, a comprehensive training course for every new hire, covering technical skills, service standards, and professional ethics. Every employee now completed 2 weeks of onboarding before stepping onto the floor, a foundation for rebuilding a culture of respect. A new mission statement now hung proudly by the entrance: quality food served with dignity and respect for everyone. Not a marketing slogan, but a commitment born of hard-won lessons. Ethan took a sip of coffee, then asked gently, have you thought more about the scholarship program we discussed? Ellie's eyes lit up with hope. I've finalized the proposal. We'll start with 2 full scholarships for culinary or hospitality management. Miguel's nominated Javier, his sous chef. The kid has real talent. Their conversation paused as the front bell chimed. Ethan looked up reflexively and sat straighter. Sarah and her son Tyler walked in, looking far more polished than on that painful night months ago. Emily followed his gaze and smiled. Right on time. After the firings and restructuring, Ethan had spent 2 weeks tracking down Sarah and Tyler, not for business, but for conscience. A server had remembered the boy from school, and Ethan personally visited their small apartment. He apologized and invited them back as honored guests. Now, every Friday evening, they returned, part of a healing ritual, a thread of memory mended. Tyler had changed. No longer shy, he dashed to his regular spot, high-fiving Miguel as the chef peeked from the kitchen. Is there lobster tonight, Mr. Miguel? The boy asked, eyes glowing. Of course, Miguel grinned, playfully secretive. I saved the best one. Just for your birthday. It wasn't his real birthday, but the staff had quietly agreed. Every Friday was a celebration. For the birthday dinner, once ruined. Sarah caught Ethan's eye across the room and offered a small, confident smile. Her life had changed too, partly through her own strength and partly thanks to Ethan, who'd connected her to a job at a friend's accounting firm. The role became full-time with benefits, letting her move to a small house near Tyler's school. Ethan returned to the folder. The sales growth was satisfying, but what couldn't be seen in numbers meant more. The diner had finally become what he envisioned that first night. A place where human worth wasn't measured by a wallet. Not all former employees had disappeared quietly. Paul had threatened a wrongful termination lawsuit, but backed off after seeing the compiled evidence. Kayla had tried spreading rumors about the new management, but public opinion quickly shifted as service and spirit transformed. Mr. Cole, a young waitress approached. There's a call for you in the office. Ethan rose and made his way to what was once Paul's domain, now Emily's headquarters for scheduling, team meetings, and operations. Efficient and neatly organized, he picked up the phone. The Portland location is ready for your approval, his agent reported. It's exactly what you asked for. Schedule a walkthrough for Tuesday, Ethan replied, and send the demographic reports to Emily. She'll be leading the expansion. The Blue Harbor success had convinced Ethan it was time to replicate the model. A second location was underway, and Emily would run both the original and the new branch. Back in the dining room, Ethan caught the moment Tyler received his lobster. The boy's eyes widened with delight. Miguel had outdone himself. Decorative vegetables shaped like sea creatures surrounded the glistening dish. The image captured everything Ethan had hoped for. A place where moments mattered, where staff felt pride in their work, and where every customer, regardless of background, was treated with heartfelt respect. Emily returned, placing a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. I've been thinking, she said, about what really made the difference. Your leadership? Ethan teased. No, she said, shaking her head. It's because you chose to see, really see. Most owners look at numbers, patch up appearances, but you sat in the customer's seat and lived it, understood it from the inside. Ethan looked toward Tyler, cutting into his meal with careful pride. Sometimes, he said quietly, to understand the true worth of what we build, we have to sit where others sit. Emily followed his gaze. Miguel approached Sarah and Tyler's table with a small chocolate cake, a single candle glowing. The diner's monthly unbirthday tradition had become a cherished ritual. Another pretend birthday, Emily joked. No, Ethan smiled. Today marks Sarah's 1-year anniversary at the accounting firm. Miguel and I thought we'd surprise her. Laughter, clinking dishes, and murmured congratulations filled the warm air. Ethan sat quietly in the moment. No disguise, no pretense. He had built something real, not just a restaurant, but a miniature model of how the world ought to work, where dignity is standard, respect is currency, and kindness is the common language. From his familiar corner table, the once anonymous owner smiled. He no longer needed to pretend, because what he'd built was finally strong enough to stand on its own, grounded in the truth. A successful business? Yes, but more than that. A guiding light, proving that integrity is never something to compromise.